Good evening. Welcome to a special midweek episode of the Irish NFL show. A break from the norm in terms of reviewing games and previewing games. And tonight we have a very special guest, a returning guest to the show who was on with us in January last year. Two-time Super Bowl champion, two times kicking the Giants to Super Bowl. LT has great fondness for this side of the world, having grown up in Scotland, a Celtic fan. You're very welcome back to the Irish NFL show, LT.
Thank you guys for having me. Did you guys enjoy the World Cup? The U.S. made it out of the group stage. So I thought that was important. And then obviously, what a World Cup final. See, that's my first love is the real football, not the American football. But it was good to see the Yanks advance. But that World Cup final was something else, wasn't it?
The World Cup final was
Oh,
truly
my
amazing.
God.
It really was. And it was coming into 6 o'clock in the evening here where the NFL was due to start, and that's normally the time when we're settling in for 6 or 7 hours of red zone with the Giants game on one TV and Colin will have his Broncos on another. But that game was
Do they televise Broncos games?
Game Pass.
They do for us masochists, LT, yeah.
Okay.
What was amusing during the World Cup, LT, was the interest from the States. Obviously, we're listening to US podcasts daily, with obviously for our teams and various different outlets. You know, your podcast, obviously, the Blue Rush, and I listen to Sports Radio New York, Y-Fan Radio. And as the competition progressed, the interest in how the States were doing kind of kept getting better and better to a stage where people were actually asking whether they had a realistic chance of beating the Dutch, but they lost out to the Dutch. But it was just, it's funny at times. People started off slowly, then really going to get into it.
Well, yeah, we should have beat England. We had tons of chances. We just couldn't score. The Dutch were just a better side, way better side, actually. But they're improving. They're very young. I think they were the second youngest team in the World Cup. And a lot of young international talent, finally, with Musa and Pulisic and all these guys that are playing over in the EPL and La Liga and, it's Series A. It's just different times for the U.S. soccer. And we're hosting in 4 years. So I think it's created a little bit of a buzz for 4 years from now. Because where I live in Kansas City, we will host a few games from what I've been told. So I can't wait for them to come back. And then there was a weird rumor that Ronaldo was this close to signing with Sporting Kansas City. I don't know if you guys saw that, but that would have been crazy. I don't go to a ton of MLS games, but they do very well here. MLS is really growing. The MLS is, selling out every stadium, every game. The Atlanta team, they average about 50,000 fans a game. That's pretty incredible for American soccer.
I think Kansas City won out over a mile high in terms of being selected for the stage. Another day in which Kansas City beats them.
That's not fair.
LT, Ireland beat England in the European Championships in '88, and it's still talked about here as if it was yesterday. And that's probably, we talk about like the look of the Irish. And over the summer months, we got to talk to we were fortunate to talk to Chargers GM Tom Tedesco. We talked to Kevin O'Connell from the Vikings. And I suppose most importantly for this discussion, we talked to Joe Schoen when he was just getting his feet in under the table. And obviously all three of those gentlemen are with teams who are in the playoffs. And Shane was really interesting, obviously stepping up from assistant GM to GM, but he talked about the importance of having dependable players, players who can contribute no matter what their status is, no matter what their previous NFL experience is. And it was almost, I suppose, like he was forecasting the Giants season with the way things have gone with injuries and guys having to step in. How impressed have you been with Joe Schoen and what he has managed to do, given what he inherited from the previous regime?
Yeah, it's nothing short of unbelievable, to be honest with you, because I think, including myself and all the prognosticators out there, that no one had the Giants winning more than 6 or 7 games, I don't think. But he's been able to bring guys in, smart, tough, dependable, right? That's their motto. Joe Schoen and Brian Dable is smart, tough, and dependable. They picked up Isaiah Hodgins, who he drafted, who has come in and been a really good player for them in the last 6-7 weeks, however long he's been there. He's a legitimate number 2 receiver. He's big. He's not super fast. But just the parts they've added, a lot of that secondary that played since Adoree Jackson and McKinney went out, a lot of those guys, McLeod and some of these other guys, Pinnock, some of these guys weren't even on the team until the season started. So it's a big, it's, you got to salute the coaches. They've been able to come in, Wink Martindale, especially on defense, and get guys that have not been there very long to play well and play together, I think, most importantly. So Joe Shane deserves a lot of credit for that. He's always been known as a very savvy personnel guy. Everyone was clamoring for the Giants to sign Odell Beckham. Well, look what Isaiah Hodgins is doing. He stood pat. He didn't do anything crazy. And I think he made the right decision. Not that I don't think Odell Beckham coming back to New York wouldn't have been fun. But, of course, I just don't think he's ready to play. He had an ACL 10, 11 months ago. That's not enough time, especially your second one, for a guy to come in and contribute. So really happy for the Giants. And obviously it seems like they've got the head coach and GM right for a change. It's been a while.
LT, going into the season, obviously the microscope is under Saquon Barkley. He's coming back from a number of injuries. He's been kind of battle tested whether he's in a position to come back and be so as effective as he was in his rookie year. And a lot of them, his question marks are down to injury, I would say, more so than his natural talent. On the flip side, the quarterback, Daniel Jones, a lot of people felt with a blank canvas and a new GM, a new head coach, that he wouldn't have survived and they would have looked elsewhere and potentially brought in a bridge quarterback for a year, under the assumption that this season wouldn't be a good year and you'd be picking high in the draft come April when it's in Kansas City, your hometown. Daniel Jones has done everything this year that has been awesome. I mean, his turnover ratio has come completely down compared to previous seasons. Coming into the free agency with so much money to spend, I know we're kind of getting maybe a little bit ahead of ourselves. People are saying, wait and you see once he gets really good wide receivers in here. Like, is that necessarily worth doing? Because, what's working now is so effective. Is it a case of let's continue as we are and run the offense based on what he does best?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, you still need a number one, though. I mean, you have to have something to open up the field a little bit. I mean, this offense has a bunch of, really, they have a number two, maybe two of them, and him and Hodgins and Slayton, and then a bunch of threes. Richie James is a good player, but nobody that really scares you that you game plan against. There's no team playing the Giants that goes in and game plans against their wide receivers or tight ends. It's really Saquon in the running game and Daniel. So a wide receiver helps them in a multitude of different ways outside of, catching a bunch of balls and yards. It's just, it's going to help them open up the offense a little more. I said this at the beginning of the year, and I don't know if it was with you guys or my show. I said, week one, the Giants would love nothing more than have tough decisions to make at the end of the year on Saquon and Daniel. And they have that. They have two really tough decisions to make. Do you franchise one? Do you let one walk? Do you pay both of them? The cap's going up. They have cap space, but the Giants have a lot of holes on defense outside of, linebacker is a big issue, middle linebacker. I'm not talking about outside. And then the interior of the offensive line is playing really well lately. They've only given up 3 sacks in the last 3 games, 2 of the 3, no sacks. So they're playing really well at the right time. And that's a great question. They can continue down, but I still think you need a number one wide receiver. They're going to have to spend money in free agency or draft.
In a way, the week 1 interception late in the game where Dable went over and voiced his opinion directly in his face, similar to what he did with Slayton last week when he fumbled the ball.
Yeah.
I suppose that's been a kind of it probably would have happened at some stage, but it happened so soon in the season, so in week 1, that was probably the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah. There's a guy too, people forget, everyone wants to look at like the draft and free agency. The Giants have good players on their own roster that are on IR. They really do. And people, I think us as fans, we tend to forget about Colin Johnson, 6'6", 230 pounds, who was literally going to be the Giants' number one wide receiver this season. He really was. He's a big, strong kid out of Texas. He was with Jacksonville. We signed him last year. He played a little bit, but he was really having an unbelievable camp towards Achilles. One of their starting middle linebackers that was penciled in was the 5th-round pick, and I can't think of his name right now, but they drafted him this year. They've got 2 linemen that they, drafted out of North Carolina that are both on IR. They've got a lot of things in-house already. So if it was me and I'm guessing, I think the Giants are going to go out and spend big money on a number one. I think you'll still draft receivers to help out and build some depth, but playing receiver, I I would definitely go out and spend the money to get like a T. Higgins, right? He's going to be available. The Bengals can't pay both him and Jamar Chase, but we'll see what happens.
LT, I suppose my poor old Broncos, obviously, things haven't gone well this year. And Nathaniel Hackett had made maybe the opposite decision to Brian Dable. Brian Dable made the decision early on that he was going to hand play calling duties to Kafka. And I just, as an English lit graduate, the idea of Kafka calling plays is fantastic. But Hackett went down a different route. The Broncos are now on their third play caller this year. And kind of just stepping back, though, from that, from your perspective as somebody who's played the game and won in the game, for fans, a lot of the times on TV, we don't get insights into how coaching works and the relationship maybe between the head coach and the coordinators and the special teams and the entirety of the staff. I'm just wondering, in terms of the back, how important are coordinators and the backroom staff? Because obviously the focus is entirely on the head coach, and obviously with the Giants this year, it has been on Brian Dable. He is front and center. He is who we see. You've talked about the emotion. Brian has talked obviously there, but like how does it work with the backroom staff as somebody who's been in there and done that?
You talking about outside the coordinators? Or just coordinators?
Coordinator, however deep it goes, I suppose it's just interesting for fans because we don't generally get that perspective.
Well, I think, first off, coaching is the difference between winning and losing in the NFL. The Giants roster is somewhat different than it was last year where they won 3 games. But to be honest with you guys, it's not completely revamped. It's not like they have a ton of, Wandale, all their draft picks are hurt and not playing outside of Kayvon Thibodeau. So coaching, and I tell people this all the time, it is everything in the NFL. Everyone's the same speed. Everyone's the same height. Everyone's the same strength. What are your coaches doing to put you in a position to win or beat this, defense or beat this offense, whatever the case may be? Coaching is everything in the NFL, and I truly believe that. Offensive coordinators obviously are a big part of that. Your positional coaches, right? Quarterbacks have a coach, receivers have a coach. Typically, Kafka is just a coordinator. I'm sure he sits in the quarterback room a lot with Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor going over the plan, but he's in front of the team every day, just like the defensive coordinator and the special teams coordinator. They're in front of their entire units every day talking about the plan. But they're instrumental in winning and losing, in my opinion, in the NFL. I just always thought we had superior coaching under Tom Coughlin. I just thought, if you look around at a lot of those guys are head coaches now. That doesn't always mean that you have superior coaching, but just that's the difference. I truly believe that. It's why Bill Belichick is always in it. He's always got a great staff, including himself, who puts his team in the right position to make the playoffs every year. So I truly, truly believe in coaching. We can all draft players, and you look what Brian Dable has done with this team is basically what I'm saying. I mean, there's not a lot of great talent, outside of Saquon and Daniel and Kayvon and maybe some secondary players. But outside of that, guys, there's not a lot of people on that team that you would peg as surefire long-term contract guys or even, Pro Bowlers. Dexter Lawrence, how could I forget him? He's played great. But, yeah, they don't have a lot of superstars. But it's funny because in 2007 when we won the Super Bowl, we only had one or two Pro Bowl players, I think. And then in the second Super Bowl we won, I think we had 1, maybe 2. Again, it was like Eli and Osi. It wasn't like we were this team built, you look at the Eagles, they've got 10 or 11 Pro Bowlers. The Cowboys have 8, 9, 10, 11 Pro Bowlers. Doesn't seem to always work, but those are the teams that are pretty easy to coach.
LT, I have to ask you about the special teams. We were fortunate to have Graham Gano on the show last year prior to the Brian Dable reign, and he spoke very fondly of his time in New York so far and how he's really settled into playing in the windy conditions that is MetLife Stadium. But he's been really good this season. I think with the exception of that one game against the Lions when he was actually ill, he's been really solid. It was more about Jamie Gillan because he's had a bit of criticism, in particular the second part of the season. He started off really good, and I was asking questions to other Giants fans why the Browns let him go. Obviously, it was evident we were moving on from Riley Dixon. But the second half of the season, he's had a few rough games. Obviously, the block punt in Minnesota, which in fairness wasn't really his fault, but there was a few games here and there where he wasn't playing really well. A good solid game on the Sunday night in Washington. But your thoughts on him throughout the course of the season? He's for the pickup, he's done really well, with the exception of maybe the odd game.
Yeah, I like Jamie Gillen. He's had his issues, right? The drop snap. Thank God that wasn't a blowout loss. It didn't matter. Could you imagine if that was a tie game or something like that? The fact that it was a blowout game really helped the fact that, okay, I dropped a snap. It sucks. It happens. But I think the thing you have to like about Jamie is he's left-footed. He's a big, strong man. He's big, physical. He just needs to work on his inside the 20 stuff, which he's gotten better at. But you need a big, strong man to kick up in that part of the country because it gets really cold and windy in the winter. And he's the guy. I still think he's only 25 years old. He's still young. I wasn't even in the NFL till I was 25, 26. I was doing the CFL thing, then made it. This will be his 4th season, I think. I think he's not a finished product. He's a young player. I think they like him. He's had his ups and downs like everybody. Certainly the block punt against Minnesota was not his fault. But overall, I like Jamie. And Graham Gano is, he's better than good. He's unbelievable. Graham Gano is in Justin Tucker's stratosphere right now. And that's hard to say because Justin Tucker really had no peers ever. But the last 2 or 3 seasons, you'd be hard pressed to say that Justin Tucker is that much better than Graham Gano. I mean, they're both in a class of their own. I mean, from, what is he, 8 and 9 from 50 plus? That's crazy. So he just keeps getting better and better.
LT, obviously one of probably the most famous moments of the 07 season for you guys is the fact that you played the Patriots in the last game and Tom put all of the starters out there. Slightly different probably for the Giants this year, but they did play the Vikings just a couple of weeks ago, and it looks like it will be the Vikings again in the playoffs. Similar sort of thing for the Vikes in that they brought in Kevin O'Connell, they brought in Kwesi as a GM in the offseason. How impressed have you been with the job that they have managed to do? Because by the sounds of things that came out over kind of the course after late into the Zimmer reign and over the course of the summer, it seemed like it got pretty toxic in Minnesota last year.
Yeah, it's very impressive. Like I said, I think anytime first-year coaches come in, like a Dable, like the guy, what's his name in Minnesota? I'm sorry, I just drew a blank.
Kwesi is the GM.
The GM, yeah, Kwesi. Those two guys and Joe Shane deserve a lot of credit for putting the team together and obviously hiring the right coach. Mike Zimmer, I'd heard the same things that you heard. It got a little toxic. Him and if your quarterback and head coach don't see eye to eye, it typically never works out, right? We're seeing it right now with Derek Carr out in Las Vegas, right? That's going to end badly. He's gotten benched, and you see it all the time when quarterbacks and head coaches do not get along, which Kirk Cousins and Zimmer didn't from all the rumors that we heard. So you have to be in lockstep with your head coach, and it seems like they are. What's the head coach in Minnesota's name? I'm drawing a blank.
Kevin O'Connell.
Kevin O'Connell. Yeah, sorry. So quarterback, right? Former quarterback, offensive guy. Kirk believes in him. Kirk's playing great. Same thing with Dable, and obviously he's a quarterback coach by nature, offensive guy. Him and Daniel see eye to eye. It's really neat to see that these new first year guys taking their teams to the playoffs. And I think, but I would say Dable just being a little bit of a homer as the coach of the year in the NFL. I mean, a team that won 3 games last year, and there's a lot of good candidates, but O'Connell would be one of them too.
Yeah, and just maybe one of the things that we saw, because I think O'Connell has done a fantastic job, but one of the things that kind of emerged last week after the loss to the Packers was around the footwear at Lambeau. And we saw Vikings players slipping here, there, and everywhere. Now, you're a man who knows all about playing at Lambeau and winning games at Lambeau. And we know Robbie Gould approached you for advice even last year. I'm just wondering, in terms of, is Lambeau that different? Did the Vikings players underestimate it? Would that be a concern that, because we've heard Kevin O'Connell and some of the older or the veteran players say they tried talking to the younger guys, but they didn't listen.
Yeah, it's true. Sometimes players get caught up in consistency of their footwear that they want to wear. You have to always wear. Coach Coughlin used to always tell us before a game, wear shoes that work. That very simply means go out to the field in pregame and try on this shoe, that shoe, this cleat, this quarter inch, this half inch. Believe me, the NFL equipment staffs have everything you need. There is no excuse to be slipping, period. That's on the players. Like, they can point fingers and say Lambeau Field stinks and all this other stuff, but both teams play on it. So I've never been real big in the excuse making on footwear and slipping. When I see players slip, I automatically, some people will say that's unfortunate as a fan. That's just dumb. It's your fault. You're a professional athlete. Go get the right cleats and right shoes on. There's no excuse for slipping on a field that's maybe a little slick, because you can, like I said, these equipment managers and the teams, we have everything we need to be successful. So that's just an excuse on the Vikings part. That field is fine. They have the coil system at Lambeau that warms the field to keep it from getting frozen underneath the grass just below the surface there. So I think sometimes it can get moist, but again, there's really no excuses at this level to be slipping all over the field when you have all those resources available to you.
LT, I'm glad you mentioned Tom Coughlin, and I'm glad Cotton referred to you kicking winning field goals in Lambeau, because I'm in the middle of reading this great book that's been written by Tom Coughlin.
There it is.
You're fortunate to have him on your the podcast recently. As I said before we recorded, I can remember where I was for every game that season, all those years ago, even on the second Super Bowl. But one thing I didn't realize, having read through the book, was around the player counselling, which Tom Coughlin put together, and it was around the fact that he was trying to amend his ways of coaching, and he'd put these councils together. You were obviously involved in the second one more so than the first time round, but can you speak to us about that? And obviously, we don't see head coaches like Tom Coughlin around anymore, so it's a big transition to how it is today.
No, they just go to TikTok and social media. Tom was changing his ways, and people always ask, well, what was he like before? And I always say, look, I don't know. I got there in 2007 when he changed. So I don't have any relationship with him prior to that. But he started the Leadership Council in order to be kind of like a conduit from him to the players. And he really let the players police the locker room, police the team. So being on that Leadership Council, in 2009 through 2012, not for this book, but I've been on the Leadership Council. Basically, he meets with us once or twice a week, typically once if things are going well. And he wants to get a pulse of the team. And so basically when you go in there, typically on like Friday, or it was typically Friday, he wanted to know how guys felt physically. Are guys tired? What's going on? Anyone having any problems? And it was really cool because it was such an open forum for us to speak to him and say, hey, coach, so-and-so's, got something going on at home. And he would take note of that and like, just understand maybe if this guy, I thought it was brilliant. But it was really just to get a gauge. And then he would also in turn, though, if he didn't see things being done at practice properly, like in terms of effort or something like that, he would make sure he told us, so we would relay that information to the players, because ultimately it was our team. And he let us control that. And he let, 8 leaders, typically it was like 3 from offense, 3 from defense, and then 2 guys from special teams or whatever the case may be his messengers. And I thought it worked out really well. He can yell and do all that stuff and all he wants, but it's always different when it comes from your peers, when a Justin Tuck is going up to a Jason Pierre-Paul as a young player and saying, hey, Jason, you need to get your shit going, right? Coach is looking at you, thinks you're being lazy. That hits different for players coming from a peer than it does a coach. So I thought it was a great idea of his. They still have it, as far as I know, in New York. And I think a lot of teams, after hearing about ours, have leadership councils. So I think they're great.
LT, maybe to ask about one of your former teams, and I know you're living in the Overland Park area. I've actually been there myself many moons ago. I did. I dated a girl from Overland Park and visited Kansas many moons ago now, but enjoyed it. Amazing barbecue. But the Chiefs under Andy Reid, particularly in the regular season, they are a machine. They're phenomenal. And again, this year, even though in recent weeks they've struggled against a bad Broncos team, struggled against the Texans, but they're doing enough. And I suppose just interested, like, do you see them having enough to go all the way to Arizona, or is the fact that the AFC side of the draw is that little bit stronger than the NFC, certainly it would seem this year, going to maybe catch up with them?
Yeah, I listen, as long as Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback, I think you can win any single game you play, and he's definitely the MVP. I know there's been some Jalen Hurts talk and, Jefferson, who kind of had a bad game last week, but absolutely the Chiefs it's Patrick Mahomes, guys, and Andy Reid, and the defense will shore itself up. I know people are saying, well, they haven't played well. Well, Steve Spagnuolo, who was our D coordinator in 2007, he's got the right guys over there. He's got Chris Jones. He's got some great players. They got great linebackers. Secondary is questionable, but if they get to play at home all 3 games, which depending on what happens with this Buffalo game, Bengals game, it looks like right now, fair or unfair, it looks like the Chiefs have home field advantage. I don't know how the league is going to figure that out. And we can talk about the Damar Hamlin thing in a second, which was scary and unfortunate. And thank God all the reports coming out now are, that kid's a fighter and it looks like he's doing pretty well. So thank the Lord for that. But yeah, the Chiefs can absolutely win it. And I to be honest with you, I would pick them as my favorite. I know the Bengals have owned them in the last three games last calendar year, but I would never bet against Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce.
LTO, I'm just going to actually ask you about Monday night and the game. We're probably going a little bit off topic, but the week that's in it, the NFL is in flux in terms of what they're going to do with the scheduling. Yeah. Obviously, there's more important matters than football right now in terms of a player's health and his long-term diagnosis. You watching the game on Monday night? Like it was 2:00 in the morning here. Colin, in fairness, stayed up to cover the game for the show on Monday night, so he got to watch it live. It was a bit surreal for anybody, whether you played the game or a fan. In your time playing the game, can you ever remember anything of experience? We see concussions, we see players are down for a period of time, then they get up. But Monday night was something that is just unmanageable. We saw one recently, a couple of years back in the Euros, where Christian Eriksen was playing for Denmark.
Yeah, I remember well.
It came up on a few US shows today. They didn't really know who it was about, but we would. But it was similar in a way, but horrific to watch and experience on TV.
Scary. Yeah, I was sitting there with my wife watching, and we love the NFL, right? It's been great to us. It's been great to our family. I love the sport. I love the game. I love all the players. That one just felt different, right? You saw him make a tackle, look innocuous. He stands up, and then the collapse was the scary part. And then the feverish way the medical staff and players were acting, it felt different from the moment it happened. And you just don't see that. We've seen guys get knocked out. We've seen guys get concussions. Matter of fact, Tua on that field 6-7 weeks prior to that was, where his injury happened in Cincinnati. And the poor fans of Cincinnati saw Ryan Shazier, paralyze himself. It's ironic that all 3 of those things have happened in front of those fans in Cincinnati, but I was scared to death. And when someone starts doing CPR on a player, I know instantly that means he stopped breathing. That hasn't happened since I've been following the NFL. I know they said a player passed away in 1971 after the game, a Detroit Lions player. I can't think of his name, but that was different. But you talk about Christian Eriksen and you talk about Damar Hamlin, and if God was watching them, there's only 2 places that you could probably have a heart attack or fall down like that and stop breathing and probably come out alive. And it's a soccer game and a football game where there's medical personnel just waiting for things like this to happen, because I don't know, we don't know the long-term prognosis of it, but everything that's coming out of Cincinnati right now and his family spokespeople he is doing well. And I don't know what well means. Does it mean he ever plays football again? Who cares? As long as he can just live his life again. This is a life story, not a football story, but definitely scared. It's tough to sleep that night. Obviously playing in the NFL, I think of that as a fraternity of mine and a brother of mine who I've never met. And he was just, like Ryan Clark said it really well on ESPN, he was just living his dream. And, the positives are, like I said, thank God it happened on an NFL field, because I don't even think guys at practice, if that have happened at practice, there's just not the support system there medically that probably saved his life on Monday night. So everything just aligned there.
Yeah, and I think that like lessons were probably learned from previous tragic incidents. I mean, I remember Marc-Vivien Foé passed away playing for the Cameroon back in 2003, a former Manchester City player. And I think it maybe at that point sports ensured that they did have the medical personnel, and we are very relieved and very grateful. Even I think the only thing that maybe has been really great to see out of it is obviously the donations to Damaris charity, but the fact that the NFL community from around the world has come together, and the outpouring of support, and hopefully he does continue to get better. LT, I'm wondering now that your Giants are doing pretty well this year, and Celtic are having a pretty nice season as well. Have you been able to keep up with happenings in the Scottish Premier League?
Yeah, they had didn't they draw with somebody the other day? Not a good match. Some crap team too. I forget who it was.
It was a late equalizer is almost like a winner.
Oh, it's against Rangers.
Games,
so
right?
That's you just never want to lose to Rangers. That's fine. But Carter Vickers plays for the U.S. as a Celtic man, and a lot of good. Maeda had a good World Cup, and I can't think of the guy's name that plays for the Czech Republic. Yeah, the Celtic is. I need to follow them more closely. It's just the time difference. I don't know how you guys do the NFL being over there and all the games being the time zone they're over here. I have no excuse because when they're playing, it's probably like 10 in the morning here, so I should be able to follow it. But during football season, American football season, I'm so consumed with NFL football because, as you guys know, it's 7 days a week, the news cycle. Talking about your team, waiting for the coach to speak, and seeing who's going to play, who's going to practice. I never thought I'd be that guy, but here I am.
And you did get to play internationally in London, right? You were part of the Giants team that came over. What was that experience like, kind of decamping for a week and like what as like for the actual players, like how does that work for your sleep schedule? How do coaches try to approach that?
Yeah, I think that it's changed since 2007 because I want to say the Giants only got there like a day before, 2 days before, something like that. Friday morning and played Sunday. So we got there like a Thursday, maybe. So maybe just a day earlier. We went right to Chelsea. Right as we landed, we went right to the practice facility at Chelsea's place. I loved it. It was, Wembley Stadium, 80,000 plus. The field sucked. The field was terrible. Grass, we tore it up. If you remember that game in 2007, it was a mud fest. We won 10-7 against the Dolphins, and the Dolphins were terrible. But the field was built for obviously 150, 160-pound soccer players, not 330-pound linemen. And we ended up, and it was raining, so the field was just getting destroyed throughout the game. And I remember being on the sidelines kicking, and the little Wembley field keepers were like telling me I couldn't warm up on the sidelines. And I was going, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean? He goes, you're tearing up the grass, you're tearing up the bloody pitch. And I'm like, so what? This is my job. I'm going to kick here. Like these little Wembley field keepers were like telling us we couldn't kick on the sideline. I was like, so I had to get like my security from the Giants to tell these guys to like leave me alone so I could warm up. But the game has evolved, right? I know we missed each other in London this year, but I had a great time with my family, went to the Chelsea game. But man, what a different scene being at Tottenham Stadium. That was incredible. What a place. I had a great time, and obviously the Giants beat the Packers, so that made it better.
Yeah, we replaced you with Brandon London for that live show that morning.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's probably a little better than I am. He's, Brandon is Mr. Media. He doesn't have a wife or children, so he can do whatever he wants.
Well, Colin joked to me after that game because we were in the media area, and obviously you're supposed to remain impartial in the media area. And as the game progressed and we got to the fourth quarter, it was all bets were off, and I was jumping around the media area. I wasn't remaining calm. Let's put it like that. It was a great.
What a great stadium, man!
Yeah,
beautiful. Yeah, I don't think I've told anyone this publicly. We left like with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I was just trying to beat traffic because in my head, I'm sitting there thinking, how am I going to get back? And how long is this going to take? Because I remember walking into the stadium and there was just, I haven't often been a fan like in that scenario. Like if I go to the Giants stadium, I'm VIP. I have people like walking me in. There's no crowds, no lines. So this was a whole different experience. And I told my wife, I said, we're going to get stuck here for like 3 hours if we don't leave now. So we left a little early. And it was tough to catch a cab back to the hotel. Jeez, there was no cabs around.
We in the pre-game show that we did with Brandon, it was very interesting, LT, because we were doing our game picks, and he picked the Packers. And as the words came out of his mouth, it was like a WWE wrestling moment. License plate guy came running down like something definitely like Hulk Hogan with the hair just all over the place, and called Brandon London out live on our show for picking the Packers. It was one of those moments, even as a non-Giants fan, I don't think I will forget that. Definitely the hair going with license plate guy coming down, probably the Ultimate Warrior.
I actually that week picked the Packers too. Just
but now license plate guy is going to arrive in Kansas. That's what's going to happen now.
Yeah, here he comes. And then me and Brandon did a show that evening. We have to do our post game show from London, which was a challenge because he was in. When he does all his talking. Even I don't know if you watched our show this week. I mean, he's busy at the stadiums, emceeing and talking the whole time. So he talks all week on his SNY show. So he rarely has a voice. I don't know how he does it.
I felt sorry for him on Monday's show. I don't know how you should have left him off this week, giving him the even off.
Yeah.
LT, you've been very gracious with your time. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we have a deep playoff run, and we might have you back on later on in the season.
No, yeah, listen, I listen, they're a team that is finally starting to believe in themselves. I really believe that. You can watch them play now, and I don't think in the middle of the season that they thought they were very good. I shouldn't say that. I just don't think they truly believed. And I think now they have a team that believes in each other, and that's dangerous in the playoffs. It'll be beneficial if they get the Vikings first over the Niners. That's for sure. You don't want the Niners right now.
No, they're very strong. We really appreciate your time. Hopefully we'll see you again soon. And
no, I appreciate you guys as always, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, enjoy the remainder of the season.
All right. Cheers, guys. See ya.